Hello again. It's really nice to see you all again today. Um, so it's really hard to follow on from Roger. So I will try my best. This is going to be a very short presentation, just taking you through all of the clinical trials in cell therapy that are active right now. Yeah, where did it go? Thank you. All right. So I won't bore you with the definition again because that has been explained perfectly. But cell therapy is just the transplantation of human cells to replace or repair the damaged tissue in your brain. So the idea is that dopamine producing nerve cells, if you replace them, that might result in long lasting clinical improvement, as Roger has mentioned. But not all clinical trials in this area feature dopamine replacement cells, which I will get to at the end. But I first wanted to talk about the types of cells. So again, as Roger mentioned, we have embryonic stem cells. In his previous trial, he's used fetal, but this embryonic stem cells are found inside developing embryos. So they can develop into any type of cell in the body. But because of this, there are some very strict ethical guidelines that need to be followed. And because they are not, these cells do not come from your own cells, these require immunosuppression if you inject them into the brain. And then the second very popular approach is induced pluripotent stem cells, iPSCs for short. They're made in the lab. There's a very nice diagram that Roger showed where you take a stem cell from either you or someone else. You take a normal body cell, then you bathe it in a cocktail of different factors, and that reverses them back to being stem cells. And after that, you can inject them as is, or you can then engineer them even further to become, in this case, dopamine producing cell. So yeah, what do these cells become? Some of them can just be stem cells, but as Roger mentioned, if you just inject them as stem cells, they will continue to divide and that might cause problems. Or you can take them in their development so that they're dopamine progenitor cells. So they're immature dopamine producing neurons. This is a very good approach because they have the ability to then merge in the environment that they're injected in. So, but then also you can inject fully mature dopamine neurons. That's also an approach. So where are these cells being placed? Usually there's these two places. Putamen, it's in the middle of the brain here. It is the primary transplantation target because the putamen experiences the largest amount of dopamine loss, the neurotransmitter dopamine loss. And then you can also inject it in the substantia nigra. Some studies have chosen to transplant there because neurons from the substantia nigra project to the putamen. So there's a connection. They have an interaction there. So that's also an option. And some studies have chosen to inject into the bloodstream. So these, they're a very special type of stem cells called mesenchymal stem cells. Here, the idea is that they're not producing dopamine, but they would produce nerve growth factors, as we've heard in the first session today. So that would then possibly regenerate the neurons that are already there in the brain. But let's talk about that when we get there. So see, this is probably the last time you'll see this wheel today. So these, as you can see here, are the trials in cell therapy. You can see that all of them are in phase 1 because they're very experimental still. And there is a divide here between disease modifying and symptomatic. The reason for that is because the ones in the top, they are thought to release those growth factors as well. So it's not just replacing the cells, but also possibly helping the cells that you have regenerate, but that's debatable. So then we have our beautiful map. Where are these trials happening? As of 31st of January 2024, we had 11 trials registered on clinicaltrials.gov, 4 in China, 1 in Costa Rica, 1 in South Korea, one in Sweden, and the UK, one in Antigua and Barbuda, one in Taiwan, and two in the USA. So just a recap that this is, again, very experimental. It's a phase 1 trial. So the reason why it's labeled like that, it's because it's still testing the safety of this treatment. The safety is the primary concern here at this stage. So that's why all these trials are in phase 1. So again, I will not talk too much about SEMPD because Roger's already mentioned, but the type of cell that is used here is stem cell derived dopamine progenitor cells, and they're injected into the putamen. And then I think this information might be inaccurate at this point because you said that 8 people have already. Six.
Six through the next month.
Okay, so we're getting there. So 6 people have already received their cells, not 4. And then we have bemdaneprocel, really hard to pronounce. This is by Blue Rock Therapeutics. It's in the US. So what they use is embryonic stem cell derived dopamine neurons. I think they're progenitor neurons. I'm not too sure, but they're injecting them into the putamen. 12 people with Parkinson's will receive this treatment. There will be an 18-month follow-up. That's how it already happened. So the procedure was safe, and most of the cells have survived. And then they have planned a phase 2 study to start in late 2024. I think that's the most up-to-date news I have. Then we also have other studies that involve dopamine cells. We have 2 studies in China and 1 in South Korea. They're all using progenitor cells, dopamine progenitor cells, but they inject them into the putamen or striatum. So as Roger mentioned, we have the Aspen Neuroscience trial that has been very recently announced, only a few months ago. This will be a phase 1 to 2A of their stem cell product. And this is a very interesting approach because for patients taking part in this trial, the stem cells will be harvested from them. Their normal cells will be harvested from them, and then they will become iPSCs. And then because of that, immunosuppression will not be necessary. So the first transplantation was performed in April 2024, and they're currently continuing on with the trial. Now we also have non-dopaminergic cell therapy. These are all registered trials on clinicaltrials.gov. There's 2 trials in China, 1 in Taiwan, and 1, I think, in Kentucky. So what these people are doing, they're using amniotic epithelial stem cells, but they're not differentiated into neurons, and they're injecting them into the brain. And then in Taiwan, they are using those mesenchymal stem cells that are thought to release growth factors like BDNF. But they will not become neurons. And then we also have a couple of trials here, one in Costa Rica and 1 in Antigua. These 2 trials, they inject the cells into the bloodstream. There's not that much information available on these, and we're not entirely sure how they get into the brain, if they do, but they're very small. And then also some of these are patient funded, which we need to be careful about that. So there is the G-Force PD meeting. This is a global initiative that Roger is a part of, created in 2014 to bring dopamine cell replacement therapies to people with Parkinson's. So there's a team from Europe, US, and Japan, and they meet annually or every few years to identify shared practice and establish common standards, because there's so many different ways that you can inject those cells, and there's so many different regulations that every single country has to follow. So this is just to standardize that as best as possible. And the next meeting will be taking place in the UK between the 14th and 16th of May. There's also more information available on the website. And then just to finish off, if you would be happy to look at more presentations from Roger, we have this one on our YouTube. So he again explains where are we now, what is cell replacement therapy. That's from a couple of years ago, I think, or from a year ago. We also have a Cure Parkinson's webpage on cell therapy where you can find more and be guided when it comes to resources. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Just as a final anecdote on stem cells, a few years ago, I was coming back from World Parkinson Congress in Portland, and we were coming here to Rallying to the Challenge that year. So it would have been 2013.
Portland would have been 2016.
2016. And sitting on my Alaskan Airlines flight, I was looking through the in-flight magazine, and there was a spectacular ad. Stem cell therapy, cures all known ills. There was Parkinson's disease right in the middle of it. And I have to say, it was one of those things, I keep it pinned up on my notice board at work because of all the things that is providing a really complicated message, it is that ad. That is a unit that is putting in cells that you have no idea where they are, where they've come from, and there is no published evidence that's linked to it. And they are curing all sorts of diseases, not just Parkinson's disease. But it does come back to the critical thing of ask questions. What are these cells that are being transplanted? How are they being transplanted? What will they become? Make sure that you're working with a really reputable and thoughtful organization such as STEM-PD. Really be thinking about dopamine replacement because that is where you've got the evidence, and really don't respond to those ads ever, please, any of you.
No, I mean, the fundamental message is this is experimental, this therapy. If it's experimental, you should never pay for it because it should be subject to trial. So anyone who's asking you to pay for a therapy, you should be extremely cautious of it. And the other thing I would say, Cure Parkinson's has fantastic information on this. Also, the International Society for Stem Cell Research, the ISSCR, has huge swathes of information about stem cells for all conditions, but including Parkinson's. And they give you very useful documents that if anyone approaches you or you're interested, you can ask others, you can ask that company about them. And if they can't answer them, then you need to look at it very cautiously. But you shouldn't be paying for things. And it's probably emails I get quite a lot about this. So there's a whole stem cell tourism out there, which you need to be very cautious about.
And so the reason for saying that after Alex's presentation is that those trials that are ongoing, but I think for us as an organization, we are very interested in what's happening in the dopamine replacement field. And that line is the bit that you should be thinking about.
Because clinicaltrials.gov puts all trials on.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean they're good trials.
Exactly.
So a lot of people think it's...
Chad.
A group from Sweden came to talk to Team Spark about a year and a half ago. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but they didn't offer really any incentives outside of doing it.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't offer very many incentives. They said that that they would be covering transportation costs to where you were having it done, but that was it.
Right.
And that's very normal in clinical trials, as you'll have your travel and transport and overnight accommodation covered. But you should not be paying to take part in a trial.
Yes.
or necessarily being reimbursed for taking part in a trial.
No, I mean, essentially in any trial, you'll get all of your travel, accommodation, everything gets covered by the trial. All of the procedure, all of the drugs will be covered by the trial. You should pay. You should pay for nothing.
Exactly. Brilliant, Roger. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alex, thank you very much.